Legend Tadawol here, and today we've got a Legendary Lord power comparison for you, this time covering the Beastmen. So I'll be rating all four Beastmen Legendary Lords based on three criteria. Their power on the battlefield, as in how much they themselves can do, their ability to boost their army, and also how much they boost their faction as a whole. So with those three criteria, we'll give them a rating out of 10. And we'll see which one's the worst and which one's the best. With that being said, let's jump in now to the number 4 spot. Taking the number 4 spot goes to Morgr the Shadowgave. Now, despite him getting a significant boost in this update, he's still sort of falling behind the other Beastmen Legendary Lords. So jumping in and talking about his battle power, I'm going to be rating him 8 out of 10. Looking at what aspects that includes, it really does center around his Aura of Vile Transmutation. So this essentially turns him into a Mortis engine, and he doesn't need to be in melee in order for this to occur. So what that does is just causes damage to everybody around him. It primarily hurts infantry, high entity units. It's not really going to hurt single entities that much, but he doesn't need to be in melee for that, which means in sieges he's going to be quite useful. You just park him underneath a gate and then just wait until you win, essentially. So that's very useful, but not worthy of a 10 out of 10, because Morgr himself, being a melee lord and not a spellcaster, he's actually not that good in melee. He's good at tanking a lot of missiles because he gets like 90% missile resistance quite easy, and he's got a lot of magic resistance, but one of the most common weapons in this game are physical weapons, and most lords that you come up against will have a physical weapon, and they'll pretty much beat the crap out of Morgr. He doesn't have a mount, he's not particularly fast, which means it's difficult for him to avoid combat if somebody really wants to fight him. So that's the reason why he's not getting the full marks for his battle power. In terms of his command power, it's pretty good. He definitely got a significant improvement there. If we have a look at his trait, Shadowgave, he's able to provide his army with magic resistance, 20% of it, which is pretty good, but I definitely value physical resistance way more than magic resistance. But, magic resistance is definitely getting him some points here. And the other thing is the Abstraction of Tzeentch. Now, this is one that we'll have to talk about for a bit because it can be a little bit confusing. Now, the main thing we want to talk about is the horrible regeneration for Chaos Spawn. Now, with the Beastmen, they're already able to get regular regeneration with the tech tree here, and that's fairly easy to get. So this provides passive regeneration for Chaos Spawn and Jabberslath units, right? Now, what horrible regeneration does, and this is only for Chaos Spawn, is that if their regeneration reaches a point where all the entities that remain are at full health, they're able to revive dead models. Now, the problem with this is that the Chaos Spawn have a high entity hit points. So if they've taken any casualties at all, it's quite likely that most of the Chaos Spawn units are quite badly damaged. Now, they're not a very fast unit, so in order to actually get them to regenerate any of their casualties, they need to actually pull out of combat, which can be tricky because they're not that fast, and they need to hide for quite a long time in order for any of their entities to actually recover, because this ability here is disabled as soon as the battle outcome is decided, which means that, if the battle is won or lost, they don't recover any more regeneration. Now, that's the primary way that you would normally get your entities back. So what I've found, having used this, is that I very rarely see any of my Chaos Spawn units actually regenerate any entities. So this is kind of like, it's good on paper, but you just won't see this trigger very often because of the conditions needed for it to occur are just extremely rare. So it's not actually that good. Now, he does also provide melee defense for Centaurs, Chaos Spawn, and Jabberslath units. That's good. Those are the kind of units you want to put in his army. And additional weapon strength plus 15%. He also gives Jabberslaths a bonus damage area of effect, so their Aura of Madness goes to greater Aura of Madness, makes them even better. So the Doomstack you want to be giving to Morgr, if you want to Doomstack that is either Chaos Spawn or Jabberslath, maybe some Centaurs if you really want to, but that's entirely up to you. Now, that's all pretty good, but I don't think it's worthy of a 10 out of 10, which is why I'm just giving him an 8 out of 10. Now, there's some other things here to talk about that I just don't think is particularly valuable for him. So, he's got Force for Change, doesn't do the whole lot. Herald of Corruption, giving him extra campaign movement range, that's very good. That'll also contribute to his 8 out of 10 score. And then these Profane Blessings here. So, each time you put a point into this, and I kind of regret doing it, because it doesn't tell you what you're going to get. And I'm pretty sure it's the same every time. But I didn't really like the items. So it's these three here. You essentially get a Mark of Nurgle, a Mark of Slaanesh, and a Mark of Tzeentch. So the Mark of Nurgle here, it only can apply to one unit, provides horrible regeneration and physical resistance, but reduces speed. So you're probably not going to want to already put it on a Chaos Spawn. You can give this to somebody else. It doesn't have to go to Morgr. This will take into consideration with his faction strength, but not very much. I just don't value this one banner that much. Same thing with the Blessing of Mania. It's okay, but it does cause Rampage, and I hate Rampage. So it does provide a lot of extra speed, but once they go Rampage, I don't value it very much. And then we've got this one here, Blessings of Trickery, which this one's alright, makes them unspottable, gives them stalk, reduces their speed, reduces their armor. It's alright, but again, I just don't value it that much. So it's good if you want to get them. It is, I guess. It's just I don't see them as being like particularly powerful abilities. And since you're going to have so many armies, that's going to boost 3 units by sort of a weird amount, and I just don't value it that much. And then you've also got Touch of Corruption here, which that really just gives him a bit of boost for his battle power. Not a big deal though. Now, in terms of his faction power, this is sort of where Morgr lets everyone down the most. And that's with, the only thing he does is provide +2 units of Chaos Spawn. Now, that might seem okay, except that it's actually very easy to increase your capacity for Chaos Spawn. It's actually the easiest unit to increase capacity of, because you don't need to even use it in the Dread. You just keep getting Spawn Wranglers. There's no limit to the amount of Spawn Wranglers you can get, and you just get them over time, just by winning battles. So, it's not that valuable. So in terms of his faction power, I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. Overall, Morgr is going to get a 6.66 out of 10, which I think is very fitting for him, and that's my ranking for him. I think he's a good Legendary Lord. It's just that the other Beastmen Legendary Lords are now better than him, that's all. But, you know, let me know what you think about that. Let's move on now to number 3. Taking the number 3 spot goes to Khazrak the One-Eye. When it comes down to his battle power, it's really simple to evaluate it. He's just really good in melee. He doesn't have any special abilities. He's got a Tuskor or Razorgore Chariot, which essentially function the same thing, the Razorgore Chariot just being a bit stronger. And he's really an anti-infantry killing machine. You just want him to keep cycle charging right through enemy infantry, just constantly butchering them, getting his charge bonus going through. He's a very quick character, and he's just able to inflict loads of casualties. His equipment is good at just boosting his strengths. He's an individual good melee lord, but he's by far from the best in the game. Like, if he takes on other duelists, such as Tyrion or even a Carnosaur, he's probably not going to come out on top. So you really want to just stick him in to kill low-tier infantry or even high-tier infantry and just have him constantly cycle charging, and for that he gets an 8 out of 10. In terms of his command power, I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10, because he's got a lot of really cool stuff now. Now, when it comes to the Beastmen, you really want to be ambushing as much as possible, and Khazrak is able to give melee attack and melee defense during ambushes, which is very useful, and he's able to provide extra ambush success chance, because you want to try to get as close to 100% as possible, and Khazrak is actually the best ambusher out of all the Beastmen. He's also got the Hordes of the Drakvald here, which provides melee attack for Ungor, Gore, and Bestigor units, and also some missile strength for Ungor Raiders, so that's very useful at the early parts of the campaign. Now, Bestigors is the way to go with Khazrak, because not only are you able to have Vanguard deployment through his personal trait, but if you can get to Feral Fervor, he's able to provide Bestigors with Stalk. Now, this is really, really good, in addition to Vigor Loss Reduction and Strider, because Bestigors are a very strong melee infantry unit, one of the strongest in the game, right? But their biggest problem is that they're melee infantry, meaning they're vulnerable to missiles and artillery, especially when going up against the Empire. Now, if your units are able to stalk, then the enemy artillery will not be able to really maximize their efficiency with you, and you can get as close as possible before they even get a single shot in. And if you can close into combat, let's just say you're going up against a Hellstorm rocket battery, if you can close into combat as quickly as possible, the Hellstorm rocket battery will have no choice but to shoot their own troops. This is a big boost for Bestigor units, and since Kazrak has always basically been the Bestigor guy, and since you're now going to want to utilize your entire roster as much as possible, giving Kazrak a full army of Bestigors is extremely good. It's also very useful during sieges as well, because the towers aren't going to do much damage to you while your Bestigors are rushing at the walls. So very powerful command power there, but not a 10 out of 10, because he doesn't really boost his best units as much as possible. Like, not his best units, but the best units in his faction. So I think a 9 out of 10 is a pretty solid score. He's a very good commander. In terms of his faction power, Kazrak doesn't do much, but he does do more than Morgur. So I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10, largely because he's able to provide a 50% reinforcement range for all characters. That's pretty much all he does, but that's still pretty good. So what that means is that your beast herds can be further away from each other by 50% and still reinforce each other. That also means you don't have to get quite all the way to a herd stone in order to defend it if an enemy force is on the way. So this is actually very useful for setting up tricky ambushes as well. So Underhoof is more valuable than you might realize, so that's why he got 2 points for that. It's not like the best thing ever, but it is still better than 2 extra Chaos Spawn, which is why he got an extra point over Morgur. So with that being said, his score is a 7.3 out of 10, which is a solid score. I think that makes him slightly sort of above average. Now let's move on to the number 2 spot. Taking the number 2 spot on this list, it goes to the new cowboy on the block, Taurox the Brass Bull. So Taurox is an amazing melee fighter. I'm going to be giving him a 9 out of 10 score in terms of his battle power. So evaluating that, apart from just having amazing stats, he's also got some really cool abilities here, such as Brass Body, which is extra ward save, which regenerates the ability while he's in melee. He's got Blood Beast, this is an explosion ability, which he's able to keep doing. There's no limit to it. So what you could do is charging him into a melee unit and explode and then run him out so he can keep doing that. He's also very good at cycle charging, because when he punches through an infantry unit, he just charges right through them and you can just keep running out the other side. So he's able to just annihilate an infantry unit without having to stay in melee and taking damage. He's also able to regenerate once he gets Gore Feast, which gives him 8 hit points per second while in melee. So that's kind of like Vlad level of regeneration. Overall, Taurox is really good at pretty much everything on the battlefield, except when dealing with missile units, because he's very vulnerable to getting shot. Especially with armor-piercing bullets, you really want to avoid dealing with the guns. Anytime there's guns around the place, you don't want to be dealing with that, because even though he's got a lot of ward save, he doesn't have a ton of missile resistance. Guns just absolutely annihilate him because he's just too big of a target. And if he's not in melee, he's not regenerating. So that's his one biggest weakness. In terms of his command power, I'm going to be giving him a 10 out of 10. Now, this is a little bit tricky because there's a lot of things to take into consideration here. Now, command power is usually considered about, like, how much you boost your army, but Taurox has got a very interesting ability here on the campaign map, which I think we should take into consideration. Regular stance here, giving him a chance to ambush, but if you go into raid stance, it's actually kind of like forced march, where he's able to keep on moving. Now, the funny thing is with this is that even if you use up all of your movement while in raid stance, you can still go into encamp stance, which normally only takes out 10% campaign movement range. So I think that might be a little bit of a bug, but it's very useful for Taurox at the current situation. So that just enables him to catch enemies that are running away. So he's got more movement than anyone else, essentially, by doing that. And that's regardless of whether you confederate him or you start as him. So other things that he's got, Favored of the Skull Throne, he's able to provide 25% magic resistance for his entire army, which is slightly better than what Morgr did. But again, magic resistance isn't the most valuable thing. You really want physical resistance for the most part. That's way more valuable, just because you'll encounter it more often. If we have a look over here at Titans of the Deep, he provides armor for Gorgons, Giants, Jabberslice, and Cygor units, which armor's okay. It's not the most amazing thing. It's only 10 armor. But you really want to be giving Taurox as many Minotaurs as possible. That's where he really benefits them, because he gives them this ability here called Gore Feast. Now this one here was a bit tricky to understand. So it gives them regeneration and leadership and melee attack and all that kind of stuff. So the way the regeneration works is that it doesn't trigger at the start of the battle. The Minotaurs have to be in melee for 60 seconds. So it's something that'll trigger in their unit card, and once the 60-second timer is up, this is there permanently on for the battle, so they're able to keep regenerating. So what you can do with Minotaurs, and this is something that you can't really do with the Chaos Spawn because Minotaurs are way faster, you send them into melee with something for 60 seconds. If you want them to recover, you can pull them out and hide them somewhere. They can't regenerate any models, but they can regenerate themselves to full. And then you send them back into melee. You don't need to go back in there for 60 seconds. And then when you want to pull them out again, it's easy to do so because they're much faster and much heavier hitting than Chaos Spawn. You're actually going to get a lot more regeneration out of this if you use it correctly than you will with Morgr's special ability. In addition to that, you've also got his Slaughterhorn trait, which provides weapon strength for Minotaur units. You can get Minotaurs to have a lot of weapon strength now as Taurox. And then over here, you've got either Bloodcaller or Herd Lord. These are mutually exclusive. You can't get both. But melee attack for Minotaur units is pretty damn useful because you want them to kill as quickly as possible. Overall, you totally can get extremely high weapon strength on Minotaur units. So that's why he's getting a 10 out of 10 for command power. Him and his Minotaurs are extremely powerful. In terms of his faction power, Taurox doesn't really do much. The only thing that he does do is provide 1 extra unit capacity for Gorgons, which that's definitely good because that's essentially your strongest unit in the game. It's like the highest tier 1 over here. But that's the only thing he does. So in terms of faction power, and this is the main thing that let him down, he's going to get a 5 out of 10. Overall, Taurox is getting an 8 out of 10 for a power, and I think is a very good addition to the Beastman roster. But he is not the strongest Beastman Legendary Lord. Let's now talk about the number 1 spot. Taking the number 1 spot on this list has to go to Malagor the Dark Omen. There was no question in my mind that Malagor wasn't going to get this spot. Malagor's bonuses in this upgrade can be described as absurd. Everything has been improved about him, not just in terms of stats, but also his model. He's now able to fly. Now, that is such a big bonus for a spellcaster because mobility is really useful for just getting around the battlefield and casting those spells. Now, funny thing about Malagor is that a long time ago, I actually made a video called the bottom 5 legendary lords in the game, and Malagor was on that list. Because he was awful. He had a terrible lore of magic. He was no different to any other spellcaster. He just didn't do very much. He was awful in melee. He just was an awful legendary lord, and he was slow. Now, the amount of stuff that they've improved with Malagor is honestly absurd, and it is also subject to change, because some of the stuff might be considered overpowered. But it's also important to consider that when the Greenskin update came along, Wurzag got a similar sort of treatment, and he hasn't yet been nerfed. Okay, so let's talk about Malagor's battle power. It's of course going to be 10 out of 10. Malagor is able to just fly around the map casting Flock of Doom and Penumbral Pendulum basically non-stop. He has essentially like 4 different types of arcane conduits because he starts off with, let's see if I can find it, Unholy Power, which increases power recharge rate. He's got Greater Arcane Conduit. He's able to reduce his Winds of Magic costs by an absurd amount. He's just got so much Winds of Magic, like Unholy Power here, Magical Reserves there. Even with just 100 Winds of Magic reserves, you could just keep on casting non-stop, especially if you got Wild Heart and Leaf Leeching as well. You're just constantly regenerating faster than you can spend it. And he's just an absolute terror. He is too fast for pretty much any unit in the game to catch into melee. So there is basically nothing that anyone can do to stop Malagor from casting spells. He's too small to shoot, so He doesn't have to be amazing in melee. Oh, and also, with Crowfather, he's got tons of missile resistance, so even if you did have guns, it's possible to get Malagor ridiculously high missile resistance. So, even shooting him down is just unlikely. So yeah, definitely a 10 out of 10, no questions about that. Now, in terms of command power, I'm also going to give him a 10 out of 10. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because he doesn't really boost any special units that much. He is able to boost, like, a lot like Jabba Slice and Gorgons and stuff with weapon strength here or extra armor, but I don't actually value that much because honestly, in Malagor's army, the only thing I want in his army are Ungor Raiders. The reason for that is because I usually only use Malagor. I just want these guys to hide. And if I've got, let's just say, a whole bunch of Jabba Slice, it's difficult to hide all of those. Because in this particular campaign, as long as he doesn't go up against like a pure single entity army, Malagor is able to dish out the entire amount of force needed to wipe him out. Dwarves don't stand a chance against Malagor. So why did I give him a command power of 10 if you essentially don't even use his army? Well, you can use his army, and the main thing that I gave him a 10 out of 10 for is because of how much he's able to reduce enemy leadership in the area. So he reduces it by -8 here, reduces it further here, and then when he flies over them, he even reduces it further when he's got something wicked this way comes. So if we add it up, it's like, let's see, -16 there, and then with this, yeah, because it's 8 there, and then with the ability, as long as he's over them, and he removes immune to psychology, so that's -16, so -21 leadership in the local region. That means anything other than like the most highest leadership units or unbreakable units don't even need to be damaged that much in order to beat them. And like I said, if you want to do it, you totally can give him a full army of Jabba Slice. So you can give him whatever army you want, and Malagor can make it work, because it basically turns the enemy army into blithering idiots. He's that powerful. Now, in terms of his faction power, I'm not going to give the rating just yet, we're going to save that to the end, but let's just go over all the things that he does for his faction. So, Icons of Vilification, this provides 1 extra hero capacity for Bray Shamans, which is definitely good, because otherwise you got to spend Dread to get it, and even though it is possible to get tons of Dread, you got to spend it on everything, so you're always going to want more. And the big thing that he provides is Nightmarish Cabal. This is, honestly, I think this is the thing that's going to get nerfed. So Winds of Magic cost -1 for all spells, all characters. It is possible for just a random wizard to cast Traitorkin, which is a really good spell, for just 6 Winds of Magic, largely thanks to Malagor. He boosts the entire faction by such an absurd degree with that. Just that one thing. And so I can't give him anything other than a 9 out of 10. No, I'm just kidding. It's a 10 out of 10. Malagor has reached the illustrious club in which there is only one other member so far of a 10 out of 10 Legendary Lord. The only other one that I've ranked so far at being worthy of a rank 10 out of 10 is Alarielle. So, Malagor is now a 10 out of 10 Legendary Lord. He is such a powerful Beastman Legendary Lord. He can take on entire armies by himself. You can just do so much with Malagor. He is by far the most important character now in the Beastman roster, despite the fact that a DLC character has been introduced. Usually the DLC lords are the most powerful ones, but nope. Well, technically he is a DLC one, but he's the original sort of DLC pack. So Malagor gets the #1 position there. Anyway, that's the end of this Legendary Lord comparison. Let me know down in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with any of these positions. I don't think anyone's really going to disagree with Malagor being like at the top of this list, but whether or not you agree with him being a 10 out of 10, let me know. But anyway, appreciate you guys, and don't forget to check out the live stream, which is going to begin pretty much right now, where we'll be doing a This Is Total War campaign with Taurox the Brass Bull on the Vortex campaign. So don't forget to check that out, because a This Is Total War campaign with the Beastmen could actually be quite interesting, since you actually want to be fighting lots of battles. Anyway, it's the end of this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time, fuckers. Bye.